I first met Nicholas Bowman-Scargill, the fourth managing director of Fears Watch Company, back in November 2016 when he was relaunching the company. They've now just celebrated their 175th anniversary, so we thought it was a good time to relaunch the video interview from that time. Hope you enjoy it.
So it's been an exciting few weeks. So it was just over 3 weeks ago, Fears launched after 60 years laying dormant, and we launched at the SalonQP Watch Show. And we didn't really know what to expect. There is a story behind the brand, but it's a very crowded market. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of excitement of new things coming out at SalonQP. So we didn't know whether it was going to be a case that we'd have lots of visitors or people would still be going, what is Fears? Never heard of it. And it was very much the former. The show was very busy. It was non-stop from the first evening right through to the final afternoon on the Saturday. And what was so nice was, there was a good number of people who had heard of the brand. A couple of people had even heard of it historically, which was very exciting for us because there's so much you can get from an archive, from trying to gather your own information, but actually if someone's heard of something before, it just adds to the story. But it was exciting to explain the history, explain the brand to people, and run through the new collection. But we also had some of the historical watches there, so that meant that the SalonQP there was a lot to show, but it was received well by people. In the end, we handed out hundreds, if not thousands, of brochures. We actually sold some watches on the show. And then since then, the number of inquiries and sort of visits to the website and purchases have been pretty constant, and a lot more than we expected, which is fantastic. So something that people may not know about the Fears watch is actually everything that goes into the process of making it. So it says at 6 o'clock, Swiss made, which for a lot of people, they know the technical things of X percentage needs to be manufactured in Switzerland, Swiss components. But actually there's a whole bigger part of Swiss made, and that's all to do with the quality control. Now, I've spent 5 years working in Rolex, and one of my jobs was to do the final quality control after a service, which meant that I spent many years learning how to glance at a day date or at a Submariner and pick up an imperfection within a split second, because you don't have hours to look at every watch. And that was something I was very keen to bring across to the Fears watch. So when people look at the watch and they say, right, it's £650, it's got this movement, this case, this steel, this strap, the thing people often forget is actually you're also paying for the number of eyes and the number of pairs of hands that check the watch. So before the watch leaves Switzerland, 6 individual sets of eyes and hands actually check over the watch. And that's through every process of manufacture, but also a final quality check and then a final check before it's shipped. The watches arrive here in London. I check them all personally, straight out of the FedEx carton to make sure that every watch has arrived safely. Then someone other than myself checks them a week later, because if there are any loose fibers, they can shift under the glass. You want to make sure that the movement is still performing, the hands are still aligned. So they get checked again. And then before any watch then leaves here, it goes through a whole nother check. And these are checks using an eyeglass, but also doing the 1 foot test, where you just glance at the watch as if it was on your wrist. And this was always an important check we did at Rolex. It's one thing looking under an eyeglass, but sometimes you can miss an obvious issue. So it's actually all those extra processes, those extra sets of eyes, those 9 checks, they also lead to the quality of the watch, not just the raw materials. So today I'm wearing a Fears Redcliffe date with Fears blue dial. At the moment there's 2 dial colours, the blue and the white. I tend to find if I'm wearing a suit, the blue one just complements it nicer, but also it's nice at the weekend to wear the blue, put a different lighter coloured strap on. For many years I wore Omegas, Rolexes. Unfortunately I no longer have those. They had to be sold to set up the company, but you know, it's nice to wear a watch that I spent the hours designing, from the first sketches through to the final technical drawings. It's sort of every little thing I look at, I'm sort of like, oh yes, I remember doing that. The question is, what would I wear if I wasn't wearing my own watch? And there's probably, I'd say it changes week in, week out. You know, as you can imagine, I consume most of the watch media, read most of the watch blogs. I'm always kind of looking at things with a, ooh, would I own that myself? And at the moment, there's two watches kind of on my dream watch box, or, you know, fantasy watch box. One would be an Autodromo Group B. I think they're just absolutely beautiful, stunning watches which really capture that sort of 70s, 80s spirit. And also what I like is they're from a very small independent watch company like myself. But if I was going for something sort of maybe slightly more higher end, then the new Piaget Polo S. There's something about that watch which really captures the original kind of sport luxury watch of the 70s in its look and its feel. And though I haven't yet tried one on in the flesh, every time I see one I just think I really like that. It's got that sort of 70s distinctive look. I think, you know, actually if you've got the money, it's worth investing in sort of a watch which has something so distinctive and unusual about it. The great thing with the watch industry is, unlike a lot of other industries, a lot of the people working in it aren't doing it just for profit, just for money. I mean, people have always said, you know, if you want to set up a, you know, successful new business, avoid the watch industry. It's the easiest way to blow and lose a lot of money. But the thing is, it's in a way that's kind of true, because the people who work in it are very passionate about what they do. You know, even when you come to sort of the brand managers and the advertising managers, marketing managers within a huge firm and a big luxury group, they're not just working on anything. They're working usually because they love the brand, they love the history, they love the watches. And I think that's the thing that I've always enjoyed, you know, from at first being a watch lover, you know, when I was a teenager, reading magazines, you know, saving up to buy my first Omega, you know, and then, you know, working at Rolex, and then you're in the workshop and you realize everyone there, you know, absolutely loves what they're doing. You know, there isn't any sort of, you know, oh, it's Monday morning. People really are infused about the job. And then now working very much in the sort of heart of the industry, you know, dealing with suppliers. You know, you're dealing with suppliers who make tiny little components, but they absolutely infuse about the sort of the quality of this, and everyone knows everyone. It's quite a small industry, and I like that. There was a moment where I was at an event, and this was just prior to SalonQP, and there were quite a few different watch CEOs there, you know, smallish brands. And I was chatting to them, I introduced myself, and then suddenly found myself, we were talking about sort of the state of retail and Brexit and things like that. And I suddenly felt very, you know, part of this kind of part of the industry. And I think it's a very welcoming industry to people who have taken the time to learn it and understand it. I think if it's something that you think, oh, I'm just going to launch a watch and, you know, I've got no watch background at all, the industry will call you out on that. But if you've actually taken the time and put in years and the effort to understand it, then people are very welcoming and always willing to offer advice and help. It's not a case that if you buy my watch, you won't buy another watch. It's a case that people do buy multiple watches. So, you know, no one's worried about, you know, stepping on anyone's toes. So yeah, it's a very friendly industry, which is nice. So with the watch industry, it is very friendly and everyone knows everyone. I would say the one issue it does have is things move at a very glacial pace. And I've been aware of this before I started working at Rolex, before I started setting up Fears, but things do take a lot of time. And I appreciate, you know, when you're designing a watch, when you're developing it, prototyping, you know, certain things you can't rush. They have to be done properly. You know, assembling a watch can't be just done a bit quicker. You know, if you do it quicker, you lose the quality. So you've got to do things at the right time. But sometimes when it comes to sort of trends in the industry or the way the industry reacts to things, it can be a bit painfully slow. And having worked in a PR company many years ago, you know, if there was a piece of coverage that came out which was positive or negative, the expression was always jump on it. You would always be straight on the phone, coming up with an idea, and within an hour you would have arranged a photo shoot and it would all be sorted, the photos would be edited, and within a couple of hours everything was done. And that just doesn't happen nowadays. You know, this industry is something where everything is done in a very considered way, which is good, but for someone who can be a bit impatient like myself, it can be a bit frustrating on occasions.
Right, let's just get this done.
So it's now a case of what comes next, and you know, parts of the business plan have been revised, taking in the initial success and the initial orders. So the plan at the moment is what will be launched during next year, whether it will be new dial colours, new strap colours, limited editions, but also the planning work starts for the new Redcliffe model, which will come out in November 2017. And then the plan after that is one new model each year. But everything is focusing towards 2021. 2021 is the 175th anniversary of Fears. That's a very big, significant date. Obviously, Patek Philippe have just celebrated their 175th. So it's building and growing the company to a point that something very special can be done in that anniversary. But there's also the sort of practical sides. You know, at the moment, the company's still very small. You know, we only have a handful of stockists. It's a case of building the kind of network of stockists around the country. Fears won't be in every town and city. That just wouldn't sit right with the brand. I would much rather see it in sort of half a dozen places by the end of next year, places which understand the company and also are very willing to take the time to explain to customers the significance of the history, but also the details of the product. And to do that takes time. So the next 12 months, it's about sort of planning what the product timeline is going to look like, but also getting the suppliers, getting the stockists in place. The suppliers, all the work's been done with them, so now it's just a case of building and continuing to build the relationships with them. So yeah, it's a busy 12 months ahead.